Hello Year 7, welcome to Lesson 2 of Term 2 of your lesson on Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Just a few reminders on the screen of some top tips for your working. If you need to pause the screen, just remind yourself please do, but the most important thing for you to do is to make sure that you're in a quiet place, you have all your equipment ready and you have checked Teams for your instructions from your teacher. Ready to go? First thing I want you to do is to write the title and the date in your exercise book. And the title for today is Chapter 1, Fairy Tale Opening. Pause the video while you need to do that. We're going to look at this question today and we're going to think about how does the writer create a fairy tale beginning to Chapter 1 in the novel that we're reading, Coraline. So we need to think about openings to fairy tales and what writers do in fairy tales and how we can spot these things in the opening of Coraline. So, a fairy tale opening, what do you think it might include? Before I reveal them, just have a think, you don't need to write anything down. What might the beginning of a fairy tale include? There's a really obvious one that you could think of that it might include. So what could we have? Well, first of all, we might have some magic or spells. We might have some talking animals. If you think of the fairy tales that you've read, talking animals, talking creatures. Once upon a time, I imagine most of you thought about that most fairy tales start with that. A distant, enchanted or make-believe land, we've already talked about that. A castle of some sort where it's set, some sort of grand building, and a hero or heroine. Okay, so we're going to look for those in the beginning of Chapter 1 of Coraline, and we're going to read that together. Now when I bring the story up on the screen, I'm going to read the story, and there are some ways that you can help yourself read the story. It's up to you. What you can do is you can listen to my reading instead of reading it on the screen as well. I'm going to read it so you can hear my reading. You can listen to me and follow my reading on the screen as well if you wish. Or, third way that you can do it, for this section of the video, you can mute my voice and you can read the book and the pages will appear on the screen and you can read it independently. It doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you read Chapter 1 of Coraline so that you can do the work that follows. You can pause the video and work at your own pace. As long as you can read Chapter 1 and understood what is read, that's all that matters. Okay? So, Chapter 1 of Coraline coming up. Coraline discovered the door a little while after they moved into the house. It was a very old house. It had an attic under the roof and a cellar under the ground and an overgrown garden with huge old trees in it. Coraline's family didn't own all of the house. It was too big for that. Instead, they owned part of it. There were other people who lived in the old house. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible lived in the flat below Coraline's, on the ground floor. They were both old and round, and they lived in their flat with a number of ageing Highland terriers, who had names like Hamish and Andrew and Jock. Once upon a time, Miss Spink and Miss Forcible had been actresses, as Miss Spink told Coraline the first time she met her. "You see, Caroline," Miss Spink said, getting Coraline's name wrong, "both myself and Miss Forcible were famous actresses in our time. We trod the boards, Levy. Oh, don't let Hamish eat the fruitcake, or he'll be up all night with his tummy." "It's Coraline, not Caroline. Coraline," said Coraline. In the flat above Coraline's, under the roof, was a crazy old man with a big moustache. He told Coraline that he was training a mouse circus. He wouldn't let anyone see it. "One day, little Caroline, when they are all ready, everyone in the whole world will see the wonders of my mouse circus. You ask me why you cannot see it now? Is that what you asked me?" "No," said Coraline quietly. "I asked you not to call me Caroline. It's Coraline. The reason you cannot see the mouse circus, said the man upstairs, is that the mice are not yet ready and rehearsed. Also, they refuse to play the songs I have written for them. All the songs I have written for the mice to play go oompa, oompa, but the mice will only play toodle-oodle like that. I am thinking of trying them on different types of cheese. Coraline didn't think there really was a mouse circus. She thought the old man was probably making it up. The day after they moved in, Coraline went exploring. She explored the garden. It was a big garden. The very back was an old tennis court, but no one in the house played tennis, and the fence around the court had holes in it, and the net had mostly rotted away. There was an old rose garden filled with stunted, fly-blown rose bushes. There was a rockery that was all rock. There was a fairy ring made of squidgy brown toadstools which smelled dreadful if you accidentally trod on them. There was also a well. On the first day, Coraline's family moved in. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible made a point of telling Coraline how dangerous the well was, and they warned her to be sure she kept away from it. So Coraline set off to explore for it, so that she knew where it was to keep away from it properly. She found it on the third day, in an overgrown meadow beside the tennis court, behind a clump of trees, a low brick circle almost hidden in the high grass. The well had been covered over by the wooden boards to stop anyone falling in. There was a small knot-hole in one of the boards, and Coraline spent an afternoon dropping pebbles and acorns through the hole and waiting and counting as she heard the plop as they hit the water far below. Coraline also explored for animals. She found a hedgehog and a snakeskin, but no snake, and a rock that looked just like a frog, and a toad that looked just like a rock. There was also a haughty black cat who would sit on walls and tree stumps and watch her, but would slip away if ever she went over to try to play with it. That was how she spent her first 2 weeks at the house, exploring the garden and the grounds. Her mother made her come back inside for dinner and for lunch, and Coraline had to make sure she was dressed up warmly before she went out, for it was a very cold summer that year. But go out she did, exploring every day, until the day it rained, when Coraline had to stay inside. "What should I do?" asked Coraline. "Read a book," said her mother. "Watch a video, play with your toys, go and pester Miss Spink or Miss Forcible or the crazy old man upstairs." "No," said Coraline, "I don't want to do things. I want to explore." "I don't really mind what you do," said Coraline's mother, "as long as you don't make a mess." Coraline went over to the window and watched the rain come down. It wasn't the kind of rain you could go out in. The other kind, the kind that threw itself down from the sky and splashed where it landed. It was rain that meant business, and currently its business was turning the garden into a muddy, wet soup. Coraline had watched all the videos. She was bored with her toys, and she'd read all her books. She turned on the television. She went from channel to channel to channel, but there was nothing on but men in suits talking about the stock market and sports programmes. Eventually, she found something to watch. It was the last half of a natural history programme about something called protective coloration. She watched animals, birds and insects which disguised themselves as leaves or twigs or other animals to escape from things that could hurt them. She enjoyed it, but it ended too soon and was followed by a programme about a cake factory. It was time to talk to her father. Coraline's father was home. Both of her parents worked doing things on computers, which meant that they were home a lot of the time. Each of them had their own study. "Hello, Coraline," he said when she came in without turning round. Said Coraline. "It's raining." "Yup," said her father. "It's bucketing it down." "No," said Coraline, "it's just raining. Can I go outside?" "What does your mother say?" "She says, 'You're not going out in weather like that, Coraline Jones.'" "Then no." "But I want to carry on exploring." "Then explore the flat," suggested her father. "Look, here's a piece of paper and a pen. Count all the doors and windows. List everything blue. mount an expedition to discover the hot water tank and leave me alone to work. Can I go in the drawing room? The drawing room was where the Joneses kept the expensive and uncomfortable furniture. Coraline's grandmother had left them when she died. Coraline wasn't allowed in there. Nobody went in there. It was only for Best. If you don't make a mess and you don't touch anything. Coraline considered this carefully. Then she took the pen and paper and pen, and went off to explore the inside of the flat. She discovered the hot water tank. It was in a cupboard in the kitchen. She counted everything blue, 153. She counted the windows, 21. She counted the doors, 14. Of the doors that she found, 13 opened and closed. The big carved brown wooden door at the far corner of the drawing room, was locked. She said to her mother, "Where does that door go?" "Nowhere, dear." "Has to go somewhere." Her mother shook her head. "Look," she told Coraline. She reached up and took a string of keys from the top of the kitchen door frame. She sorted through them carefully and selected the oldest, biggest, blackest, rustiest key. They went into the drawing room. She unlocked the door with a key. The door swung open. Her mother was right. The door didn't go anywhere. It opened onto a brick wall. "When this place was just one house," said Coraline's mother, "the door went somewhere. When they turned the house into flats, they simply bricked it up. The other side is the empty flat on the other side of the house, the one that's still for sale." She shut the door and put the string of keys back on top of the kitchen door frame. "You didn't lock it," said Coraline. Her mother shrugged. "Why should I lock it?" she asked. "It doesn't go anywhere." Coraline didn't say anything. It was nearly dark now, and the rain was still coming down, pattering against the windows and blurring the lights of the cars in the street outside. Coraline's father stopped working and made them all dinner. Coraline was disgusted. "Daddy," she said, "you've made a recipe again." "It's leek and potato stew with a tarragon garnish and melted Gruyere cheese," he admitted. Coraline sighed. Then she went to the freezer and got out some microwave chips and microwave mini pizza. "You know I don't like recipes," she told her father. While her dinner went round and round, the little red numbers on the microwave oven counted down to 0. "If you tried it, maybe you'd like it," said Coraline's father, but she shook her head. That night, Coraline lay awake in her bed. The rain had stopped, and she was almost asleep when something went t-t-t-t-t. She sat up in bed. Something went creak. Coraline got out of bed and looked down the hall, but saw nothing strange. She walked down the hallway. From her parents' bedroom came a low snoring. That was her father. And an occasional sleeping mutter. That was her mother. Coraline wondered if she dreamed it, whatever it was. Something moved. It was little more than a shadow, and it scuttled down the darkened hall fast, like a little patch of night. She hoped it wasn't a spider. Spiders made Coraline intensely uncomfortable. The black shape went into the drawing room, and Coraline followed it in, a little nervously. The room was dark. The only light came from the hall, and Coraline, who was standing in the doorway, cast a huge and distorted shadow onto the drawing room. She looked like a thin, giant woman. Coraline was just wondering whether or not she ought to turn on the light when she saw the black shape edge slowly out from beneath the sofa. It paused and then dashed silently across the carpet towards the farthest corner of the room. There was no furniture in that corner of the room. Coraline turned on the light. There was nothing in the corner, nothing but the old door that opened onto the brick wall. She was sure that her mother had shut the door, but now it was ever so slightly open, just a crack. Coraline went over to it and looked in. There was nothing there, just a wall built of red bricks. Coraline closed the old wooden door, turned out the light, and went back to bed. She dreamed of black shapes that slid from place to place, avoiding the light, until they were all gathered together under the moon. little black shapes with little red eyes and sharp yellow teeth. They started to sing, "We are small, we are many, we are many, we are small. We were here before you rose, we will be here when you fall." Their voices were high and whispery and slightly whiny. They made Coraline feel uncomfortable. Then Coraline dreamed a few commercials, and after that she dreamed of nothing at all. What we're going to do now is we're going to decide if the writer has used any of the 6 fairy tale openings in chapter 1 of Coraline. So reminder, we have magic and spells, talking animals, once upon a time, a distant enchanted or make-believe land, castle, a hero or a heroine. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to just pause the video and write down those 6 features in your exercise book, and I would write them down in a list in your exercise book so that you can put a tick or a cross next to them when we look at them. So just pause the video and write down those 6 and then restart the video when you've done that. Okay, Year 7, so I'm now going to bring up some extracts from chapter 1 and you're going to decide if these include any of those 6 that you have written down. And what I'd like you to do is to put a tick or a cross next to these that you've written down in your book, whether or not you think that they are in chapter 1. So we have this section. They started to sing, "We are small but we are many, we are many, we are small. We were here before you rose, we will be here when you fall." Their voices were high and whispering, slightly whiny. They made Coraline feel uncomfortable. We have this section. It's a very old house. It had an attic under the roof and a cellar under the ground and an overgrown garden with huge old trees in it. Coraline's family didn't own all of the house. It was too big for that. And we have this section. She reached up and took a string of keys from the top of the kitchen door frame. She sorted through them carefully and selected the oldest, biggest, blackest, rustiest key. They went into the drawing room and she unlocked the door with a key, and the door swung open. Her mother was right. The door didn't go anywhere. It opened onto a brick wall. Once upon a time, Miss Spink and Miss Forcible. That night Coraline lay awake in her bed. The rain had stopped and she was almost asleep when something went t-t-t-t. She sat up in bed. Finally, there was nothing in the corner, nothing but that old door that opened onto the brick wall. She was sure that her mother had shut the door, but now it was ever so slightly open. Okay, so just pause the video and have a look at your list. Do you think those match up with any of them? And what you can do is you can just try and write a small detail down from the extracts to match up with your list. So for example, if you think this one matched up with, for example, this one, you could write down something like huge old trees next to castle. Okay, or very old house next to castle. So you are matching up this extract with the castle. Okay, so just pause the video and do that, and then I will bring up the answers on the next slide. Okay, the answers are coming up in 3, 2, 1. There we go. So, did you get yours? And don't worry if you didn't match them up the same as mine, okay? We've got some talking animals. Animals is a little bit of a stretch because we're not sure whether they're animals or not, but there certainly are talking animals later on, okay? So I match this up to talking animals. We've got our hero or our heroine of Coraline. We've got Once Upon a Time. We should have all have spotted that one. Magic or spells. That the door was shut and then it was open. Nobody opened it. How did it get open or not? We had the castle here. And then we have this enchanted or make-believe land. You may have got these ones mixed up in a different way around. That's absolutely fine. So this land behind the door that seems enchanted or distant because she can't get to it. Okay, so well done if you got any of those. Don't worry if you didn't get all of them. Okay, Year 7, your final task of the lesson is I want you to try and explain to me the answer to the question before, which was how has a chapter used a fairy tale opening? So your opening sentence can be something like, the writer uses some features of a fairy tale at the start of the story. These are just to help you, and feel free to change some of my sentences if you want to. You can pick any of the 6 examples. You do not need to write about all 6. You only need to write about 1 or 2 of them, and it's entirely your choice which ones you need to write about. So, what would be your first example that you wanted to write about? Why do you think the writer used that example? Why is that a good thing to include at the start of the book? Can you pick one more and say what it made you feel? Why did you like hearing about the castle or the talking animals or the magical spells? How did that make you feel about the story? Which one do you think is the best one? Which one of those 6 do you think is the best thing to include as a fairy tale start? And why? Why did you think that? What I want you to make sure that you include in your answer is those fairy tale vocabulary at the top of the screen in the boxes. Okay? Try and include some short quotations, so you may need to move back in the video to include some of those extracts and some of your own ideas. So use those sentence starts. What examples did we get? Can you include a quotation from the extracts that we have in the video earlier on? And can you explain how it made you feel, why you think the writer did that? And after this, I will show you an example of how I've written this, and you can compare yours to mine. But you may need to pause the video, you may need to move the video back to the extracts so you can see them, and that's absolutely fine. So pause the video now and see if you can just write a short paragraph explaining how those fairy tale openings are in the beginning of the story. Okay, here's my example then. The writer uses some features of a fairy tale at the start of the story. The first example is some magic or spells, because the writer tells us the door was previously shut, was ever so slightly open, which makes me think of something that is magic or supernatural. I think he uses this to make me think the magic will bring trouble to Coraline. I think the most successful fairy tale feature is a distant or enchanted land, such as the bricked up wall on the other side of the door which didn't go anywhere. I think this because it makes me feel there must be something there. Otherwise, why would the writer include it? It's not a traditional fairy enchanted place because it's bricked up and we don't see it at first. It leaves us guessing what is there, like Narnia. I think it's a magic wall and we will find something terrible on the other side. So have a look at yours. The blue bits that I have included in my paragraph are what I asked you to include. So we've got some vocabulary of fairy tale starters. I have some quotations because I've got them in my quotation marks, and I have some of my own ideas. And these are my own ideas here. I think the magic will bring trouble to Coraline, and it leaves us guessing what's there, and we might find something terrible on the other side. And notice what I've done with my quotations here. I've got them in my little quotation marks because I've taken them out with little hooks from the story. Okay, so have a read of yours and see whether you have included those things. Don't worry if yours isn't exactly like mine or as long as mine. That's absolutely okay, Year 7. Well done. I hope you've worked hard this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed reading the first chapter of the story, and I hope you're looking forward to the next lesson.